The gray building, proudly reaching into the sky, reminded the surrounding buildings that it contained a podium. It was undoubtedly one of the best fashion magazines, but not the best in the country. Meanwhile, Jian Yu, an editor there who had just moved into her dream apartment, walked into the hall of the house. Standing in front of the elevator doors, she thought that she had taken out a huge mortgage, and it would not be easy to pay for it. But dreams must come true, and the pretty brown-haired girl did not regret anything, but on the contrary, was in high spirits. The elevator arrived and opened its doors, inviting us to enter. But the elderly woman inside, who noticed the stranger with an experienced eye, hurried to greet her, and letting the old woman pass ahead, having learned where the girl would live, she gladly shared gossip. As it turned out, the editor was to live next to a male couple, and this was important news for the old lady. A little surprised, the beautiful brown-haired woman stopped, and the woman, being on the crest of information, has already told that the guys are beautiful, but the girl may not dream about them. After all, men are in relationships. The woman added that according to rumors, they have an adopted child. But overall, the lady was glad that such a beautiful lady would live in their house. Jian Yu didn't like the way the old lady spoke about guys. After all, they lived in the modern world, but she didn't prove anything, respecting her old age. The brown door at the end of the corridor was cordially waiting for its owner, and she, with a box in her hands, was already approaching her. Entering her new apartment, Jian glanced curiously at her neighbors. Curiosity was bursting. All she thought about was visiting them with rice cakes. Tired of moving, in the chaos of things and boxes, the editor fell asleep, completely forgetting to activate the alarm clock. The girl could not even imagine what absurd things awaited her in the near future. A couple of hours later, opening her eyes and looking at her phone, the beauty realized that she was late for work. Cursing at herself and hastily calling a taxi, the brown-haired girl understood that she was unlikely to save the situation. A waiting orange car was ready to deliver her as soon as possible. After thanking the driver, the editor hurried to the meeting she had been waiting for a long time. But now she was late. The brown-haired girl forgot when she ran so fast. Crossing the corridors, out of breath and sweating, Jian did everything to make it in time. After all, a new editor-in-chief of the magazine was waiting for her. Running into the office, she only thought that she was finished. After all, he was the one who worked as a director in the most famous French fashion magazine. His name was Hyunmin Shin. But in narrower circles, which the heroine had yet to visit, he was called David. Before she could catch her breath, she was already being scolded. The girl was ashamed, but the charges were completely justified. Sitting down with the sunbae, she sincerely apologized, trying to calm down and cool down. And her colleague, looking at her reproachfully, did not understand how she had even come. Looking around, the editor did not see the guest, but he was already there, and even knew that Jian was delayed. Looking at her upset colleague, the editor did not understand the reason. But as it turned out later, the lady did not have the opportunity to introduce herself to the new leader, and yet she so wanted to curry favor. Sunbae, who clearly didn't like the brown-haired girl's appearance, was already searching for words. She couldn't understand how the brown-haired woman who was supposed to be introduced to the director looked like that. And the editor, sitting in an office chair, could hardly catch her breath. And yes, her appearance was completely inappropriate for the event. Jian admitted this, although it was too late. She made excuses again, and the serious lady reproachfully noted that she looked as if she had been kicked out of the house. The cute brown-haired girl, upset and scratching her head with her hand, told her that she had not yet gotten used to it. Sitting down at her desk and turning on the computer, Jian could not concentrate. Is it really that bad? The editor thought. She jumped up when a man came in and invited the team to the conference room. Swallowing the letters, she answered that she understood him. It was impossible to imagine a stupider situation, but it happened. A minute later, hugging the notebook, she was already riding in the elevator. The surrounding people whispered quietly, and Jian secretly examined the new boss. His beautiful coldness was visible to the naked eye. Suddenly it dawned on her. The perspiration that appeared treacherously indicated a frightened state. The falling notebook, followed by the pen, drew the attention of those around her. Sunbae, not remembering when her troubles would end, asked in a whisper what happened again. She didn't understand what was going on with the editor today. And Jian, who had already shared her feelings, said that if she was not delusional, then she was already familiar with the editor-in-chief. After all, it was this man who saved her from a pickpocket in Paris. But this was not the main thing, but other circumstances under which the brown-haired girl met him. He was unique. It's not for nothing that it was called the City of Light and Love. Walking along the Champ de Mars, she admired the Eiffel Tower, the aromas of pastry shops and the Seine embankment, sung by great people. Paris captivated her. Jian wanted to remember and capture pleasant moments. Numerous tourists, endlessly flickering nightlights, and a pleasant breeze plunged me into euphoria. Taking her phone out of her pocket, she marveled at how, having flown here on a whim, she was lucky enough to see beautiful scenery. The smile never left her face, and her phone quickly took pictures of her emotions. And the swindler who went hunting has already seen his victim. A keen tourist, just what he needed. Without hesitation, the pickpocket hurried to open her backpack. The treacherous lightning smoothly and silently gave opportunities to the criminal. But the editor, absorbed in the spectacle, completely did not notice what was happening. At that moment, like thousands of people visiting Paris, she was enchanted and cruelly deceived. And the green wallet has already passed into the possession of another person, but not for long. After all, a young man walking by grabbed the criminal's hand and held it firmly and securely. Not understanding the fuss behind her, the brown-haired girl looked around. The men standing behind, opposite each other, froze in an ambiguous pose, and in the hand of one of them were her wallet and passport. The brunette, angrily looking at the criminal, demanded that the stolen things be returned to the girl. The young man squeezed the pickpocket's hand so hard that he could not resist, and the green passport and small leather wallet were already flying onto the terrace board under Jian's feet. Bending down, a guy in a blue shirt and short blue trousers picked up the accessories, handing them to the hostess. And the editor, speechless, could not take her eyes off him. He couldn't leave just like that without lectures. Speaking of which, I have never seen such a carefree Korean tourist. The brunette tried to understand whether she was ignorant or naive, or just stupid. If she had been more attentive, the guy said, she would have noticed long ago that tourists were carrying bags in front of them. And paranoid people generally hide everything in their underwear, the handsome man added. It seemed to her that a mysterious stranger had come down to her with documents in his hands. Continuing to fantasize, she suggested that it was an actor or a model. Interrupting her speculation, the man held out what belonged to her. Judging by her confused look, he was wondering if she even understood what happened or not. After looking at the girl with a long and appraising gaze, the man returned the documents to her. And for a minute the editor thought she was going crazy. The trail of men's cologne, mixed with emotions and impressions, trying to move away from her, did not give rest. Hanging on the hook of feelings, the girl thought. Looking at the back of the man leaving, Jian was already shouting to wait a little. She didn't yet know what she would say to him. She just needed to stall him. The first thing she decided to find out was whether her savior was Korean, because he was fluent in the language, and she was also interested in how he found out what country she came from. But the young man, shaking his head, understood that she was not naive, but stupid. After all, he examined the passport, which had been in his hands for some time. The brown-haired woman didn't know what else to ask, but she didn't want to part with him. And the man, looking at her carefully, recommended that she be more attentive to her surroundings. After all, life, he delicately noted, is not a game on a hill. The handsome man turned around and left. Harmoniously fitting into the evening Parisian landscape, the man disappeared into the crowd, leaving Jian against the backdrop of the starry sky of Paris. Indecent thoughts and sensations overpowering her brain, forcing her to act. Realizing that she would act rashly again, Jian was already in a hurry to follow him. Damn emotions, as always, gave me no rest. Her touch surprised him, but did not repulse him. Taking the man's hand, Jian felt the warmth of his body. But the guy was not at all ready to see her again, because such girls usually did not attract his attention. Lowering her eyes, she didn't know what to say. But she definitely wanted to thank her savior. Plucking up courage, the girl offered to drink, terribly worried because she made such an offer for the first time in her life, which she herself was surprised by. The brunette looked at her in surprise, not realizing that he had not noticed at the first meeting. Opening her eyes wide, she persistently repeated the sentence, and the young man seemed not going to refuse. 3 months had already passed, and Jian still remembered his face. After all, the impression was so strong, and there was no need to say at all that this was the first one-night stand in her life. He was wonderful, perhaps the best man in her life, tender, passionate, and beautiful. But the brown-haired girl still couldn't understand how this happened. After finding out that her ex-boyfriend cheated on her on the eve of their engagement, she locked herself at home and watched TV for hours. This went on for several days. The unfortunate girl only ate and suffered, but an announcement during the broadcast about a trip to Paris changed her life. Fate was preparing a gift. She just had to take it, which she did. And now, thinking about that fleeting relationship, she had no idea how she would continue to work with him. Wondering if he remembered her, The girl hoped that he didn't. After all, no one promised anything to anyone. And now the editor, clutching her accessories tightly, cautiously entered the conference room. Turning around, the editor-in-chief looked at her thoughtfully. Slowly looking around those present, Henman stopped at John again and again, checking his feelings. His gaze, piercing the space, was full of questions. The brown-haired woman began to sweat. The excited girl tried not to look at him, although it was not easy. Sitting down at the table as far as possible, she hoped that she would remain in the shadow of events. But their meeting glances darted around the room like arrows. The editor understood that he remembered her, and maybe he didn't even forget. Not that she expected it, but it was still so unexpected. But why is she thinking about this? She should switch. Just think, just one night. But how handsome he is, she thought, raising her eyes again. And his body was perfect, the girl recalled. Closing her eyes and resting her face on her hand, Jian rushed into her dreams. Even then, in France, the man radiated nobility and elegance, she recalled. The brown-haired woman could not resist the memories. Watching him drink his coffee while looking at the Eiffel Tower, she thought he was magnificent. Then the brunette was not just a man, he was part of the ideal French landscape, and also her wonderful tour. But the sound of a male voice was already tearing her out of pleasant memories. She shuddered. Addressing her by her last name, he demanded attention. Before she could open her mouth, the Sunbei who had preceded her was in a hurry to be useful to the editor-in-chief. And Henman said that he was thinking of starting the meeting with him. Recalling his style of dialogue, Miss Yu noted that he loved to be sarcastic, and this meeting was no exception. But she had no idea how it would end for her today. Looking carefully at the editor, he noticed that he had a number of questions for her that he was ready to ask right now. And the first question sounded as expected. After all, the brunette, with sarcasm, asked if she always comes to work so early. And Jian, apologizing, said that it happened by accident and would not happen again. She really overslept and didn't even try to lie. It wouldn't be Hyunmin if he didn't jokingly say whether she was proud that she got enough sleep. The sound of laughter that rang through the audience tried to diffuse the situation. Leaning back in his chair, the brunette waited for a response, which did not come. After all, the girl very politely apologized for disappointing him. But he didn't think so. After all, the brunette has already prepared a punishment for her. Looking at her clothes, he noticed that she should be ashamed of her terrible outfit. A hanging silence enveloped the team. Not expecting such a remark, those gathered were confused, although it was addressed exclusively to Jian, and she didn't understand why now in front of her was a man who was completely different in Paris, and it made her nervous. But a minute later, having pulled herself together, the editor thought that she did not owe him anything. Spending the night together did not make him a lover, a friend, or just an acquaintance. He was exclusively her new boss. In addition, the brown-haired woman believed that he barely remembered John, but she was wrong, and she would soon realize it. The man again hurried with a question that was, to say the least, strange, and he was interested in where her phone was, to which the girl calmly replied that it was in her pocket. In an icy voice, the brunette asked to get it. Squinting his eyes, he looked like an animal that was preparing to jump. Continuing the presentation, Hanmin demanded to enter a query into the search bar. John had to find information about the fashion editor. She accepted the terms of the game, and he strongly recommended reading aloud what the girl sees on the screen. Moreover, John had to do it loudly without missing a word. After skimming the letters, she read that based on information from the encyclopedia, the editor of the fashion department is the editor of a fashion magazine. Logical, she thought. But as she continued reading, John talked about how journalism is a means of mass communication, and therefore has an impact on fashion trends. Now the girl sitting at the table felt uncomfortable, and the editor, looking at the director, continued to read that the editor's sense of style has a decisive position. Before he could finish his sentence, Hyunmin hurried to interrupt her. He insisted on repeating what he had read again. She understood what all this theater was about. It remained to figure out why. But she was finishing reading where it was said that editors greatly influence true fashionistas. The silence that followed did not hint at anything good. His drawn-out conversation, hovering in space, ended with another question. He wanted to understand whether the brown-haired woman considered herself a fashion editor or not. Rising from the table and passing by excited colleagues, the director approached the exit. She felt his presence behind her for a moment. But what he said quietly, almost whispering in French, was heard not by her, but by the girl sitting next to her. After all, he said something that would be offensive to any beautiful girl, and the brown-haired, red-haired girl was one. "Look at yourself," he said. And in his performance it sounded cruel. And the editor, looking at her colleague's reaction, asked to repeat what the editor-in-chief said. But the girl couldn't bring herself to reproduce such a message. But Jian was not the kind of girl who stopped halfway. And the frightened neighbor, trying to shield the boss, hastened to say that this was not an insult. The beauty sat so confused that Jian, lost in conjecture, attacked the girl with questions. Colleagues involved in the conversation clung to each other with curiosity, awaiting the outcome. And the neighbor said that she was ashamed to voice such a thing. But in Korean it meant look at yourself. Opening her eyes wide, Jian repeated the expression. The girl froze at the boss's tactlessness. But a few minutes later, the elevator was already lowering her, confused and upset, from the 83rd floor to the parking lot. Not noticing anyone, the editor tried to disappear into the crowd of people. Sighing, the brown-haired girl thought about how this could happen to her. Having met a lover for one night, in his person she acquires a boss. Crossing the underground parking lot, she was angry both at the man and at herself. She thought that this kind of thing only happened in dramas. Realizing that she was to blame for the current situation, she wanted only one thing, to get home as soon as possible. When suddenly a strong hand, stopping her in her tracks, forced her to slow down. Turning sharply, John was ready to fight back. But the one she least wanted to see now was standing in front of her. His gaze was hard and angry. The editor understood that the conversation would not be pleasant. Apparently, having not said everything at the meeting, Hyunmin tried to do it now. The brown-haired woman saw his internal struggle, even if he tried to hide it. But having addressed her formally, which was completely inappropriate in the parking lot, the editor-in-chief hurried to begin the interrogation. But realizing that he still needed Jian, she noticed that he was lowering his eyes. But the girl was ready to listen to him. The question that came from his lips shocked the editor. She didn't even understand what he was talking about, but judging by the look, it was not a joke. After asking again, she tried to understand the question. Approaching almost right next to her, he again asked about how the girl felt when she was eating him. What were her feelings? The brunette wondered. Perhaps Jian was stupid in some questions, but this was the first time she was asked such a question. And probably only this man could come up with such a thing. With his hands in his pockets, Hyunmin insisted that the brown-haired woman answer him, but she only muttered in response, asking short questions. The brunette came so close that she had to step back and put her hands forward. The man asked again what it was like to taste someone and throw it away. While defending herself, she did not understand when she did this, and suddenly the expression on his face changed. In a quiet voice, similar to the one she heard in Paris, he clarified that the conversation was about him. The beautiful brown-haired woman froze, not believing her ears, but already realizing that he recognized her. And Hyunmin was quick to boast of his photographic memory in response. She heard about it on social networks, the girl added, trying to keep the conversation going. But the editor-in-chief, realizing that he could boast, said that he had the ability to remember everything, like pictures. However, now the conversation was about how the man reminded him that Jian had left him. She thought about it. To leave someone, you need to at least date him, the beauty analyzed. Yes. When she woke up in the hotel room, Hyunmin was still sleeping, the girl recalled. She had to leave because of work, but that was not the only reason. She couldn't imagine looking into his eyes. Justifying herself, she reminded him that she had left a note. But for some reason now Jian felt ashamed. With her head down, she apologized for not saying goodbye to him properly. The brunette spoke sarcastically about the note in which she wrote that she had a good night, and also that it was an unforgettable experience for which she thanked the man. Staring intently into her huge eyes, the man complained that he felt used. After all, the girl lost with him and threw him away, he finished. But this generally went beyond all limits. Shouting after the leaving brunette that everything was wrong, and she didn't mean it, John realized that she had offended him. And he, as if having switched to a different wavelength, was already calmly saying that he was not here for that. Hyunmin didn't want to talk about the past anymore. He was just pleased to see her again. All the editor could tell him was that it was nice to see you too, although it sounded doubtful. The main thing is that they found out, the brunette said at last. But Jian warned not to make mistakes in his presence. It was not for nothing that he became a director. His attitude to work is extremely serious, the man concluded. Leaning against the wall of the hall, Jian thought about how one night in the Parisian atmosphere, where everything seemed fleeting and easy, could affect her work and career. The approaching elevator loudly announced its arrival, and at that moment, it seemed to her that she was stuck in the wall, unable to find the strength to tear herself away from it. The flood of memories brought her back to the cafe, where a handsome man sat opposite her at the table, offering to choose a drink. And the girl asked him to recommend the one he liked. Handing over the wine list, He asked if she drinks at all, to which the grateful girl replied that she could drink, but she didn't really like it. Looking at her, he wondered why she decided to treat him to a drink. After all, they could just order coffee. She didn't know what to answer. We had to improvise. After all, the man tried to engage her in dialogue, and the first thing that came to her mind was the desire to drink in Paris. After all, she was in a great mood despite the incident. He looked at her tenderly. The brunette liked her slender figure, shy look, and beautiful hair. Jian gave him a romantic mood that he had not experienced for a long time. Glasses of cocktails passed from hand to hand, tempting with the amazing flavors of tropical fruits and rum. She wanted to know more. He answered her simple questions in monosyllables, preferring to hide information, and she was interested to know why he was so mysterious. But the stranger thought differently. Moreover, the girl didn't even know his name, let alone who he worked for. And the brunette thought about lightness and simplicity. After all, the man understood that they would not see each other again. Therefore, I saw no point in getting to know each other better. In this case, she no longer saw topics for conversation, and having given him such an opportunity, she turned into a rumor. Leaning back in his chair, the guy didn't know what to tell her. He was interested in her stories. Lost in thought, the brown-haired woman wondered if she really looked like a person who had many stories, and she decided to tell him how she ended up in Paris. Now that she thought about it, she didn't understand whether she would ever show such spontaneity again or not. But suddenly Jin caught his scent. Captivating and tart, he captured her imagination, raising emotions and feelings to the surface. She knew that her body was responding to him. Moving closer to him and resting her face in her hands, Jian wondered what perfume the beautiful stranger wore. Stretching out her hands to him, she expected him to at least tell her its name. But it was no secret. It was Endymion of Penzlinon. She knew the brand. After all, perfume was in first place among the top scents that girls liked according to the fashion magazine. The thought, which made her smile slightly, seemed to find an explanation for his behavior. Smiling, Jian suggested that he was a womanizer. The brunette, not wanting to comment on anything, felt that he was falling under her scent. And in her gestures and glances, everything said that she did not mind being in the arms of a beautiful stranger. But that was 3 months ago. And now the magazine editor was standing at the door of the elevator that had arrived and thinking about how she would continue to work with the brunette. Pressing the button in the elevator, she didn't understand why she remembered all this now. But at that moment, an unfamiliar voice, which asked to hold the door, was already cutting through the space. Startled, she shifted gears and pressed the stop button. And a young man was approaching the elevator with a box in his hands, with a little girl in a blue dress. Entering the elevator and standing opposite Jian, the man asked the little girl to thank the lady for hearing his request. A fair-haired girl with 2 cute ponytails was in a hurry to fulfill his request. The huge eyes of Sulia, that was the name of the little beauty, looked at Jian with curiosity. Leaning towards the child, the brown-haired woman, surprised at the girl's cuteness, said that she was wearing a beautiful blue dress. Lifting her skirt, the little girl proudly replied that her dad bought it. Looking enthusiastically at the beautiful creature, Jian noticed that she was lucky to have her father. But what she saw a second later, turning her gaze to the man, struck her. The family seemed to have excellent heredity, she noted. His hair, the color of ripe wheat, fell softly on his forehead, and his cognac-colored eyes shimmered with warm sparks. Every feature of the appearance was thought out to the smallest detail, but something haunted Jian. Realizing that the girl was about 5 years old, she wondered if her father was too young. But a man could marry early, the editor reasoned. But Jian's curious mind was already analyzing the information she received from the elderly lady in the elevator. After hesitating, the brown-haired girl realized that she had not pressed the elevator button, and apologized about it. But the man's pleasant baritone clarified that it had already been pressed. Looking at the button, she hurried to ask a question. Having apologized, Jian asked if they lived in apartment 1003. The handsome man was surprised by the question of an unfamiliar girl, but confirmed her guesses. Cursing herself for her curiosity, she again asked a question, tactless but apparently important to her. Were they a gay couple? The girl asked and fell silent. The fair-haired handsome man, sweating from surprise, did not know how to correctly answer the impudent man. After all, she, crossing personal boundaries, climbed into someone else's life. And then the little girl, who apparently was not privy to her parents' secrets, asked her father when her dad would come. Jian, who was watching everything, noted that the girl really has 2 fathers, which is very funny. The young man turned sharply, looking contemptuously at the brown-haired woman, and she, putting her hands in front of her, tried to justify herself. After all, she was not a homophobe, the beauty argued. Plus, Jian noted, they looked so cool that she would support them. But the young man, not understanding what she was talking about, hurried to hide behind the walls of his apartment. The man was confused. Remembering the brown-haired woman, he did not understand who in this house was spreading rumors about them. But the phone ringing in his pocket, distracting the guy from his annoying neighbors, switched him to a family conversation. Changing the tone of his voice, he greeted his friend by name. He was glad that Hyunmin Ah would soon return home and wanted to share the news of his new acquaintance with him. A woman wearing a burgundy raincoat and a smile on her face entering the office was clearly glad to be back at work. Seeing her subordinates, she joyfully greeted them, calling them bastards, abandoned to their fate. And those, like children seeing the lady, rejoiced at her return. After all, the deputy editor-in-chief supported them in all their endeavors. Taking a quick glance at the sunbae, who was giggling softly, the woman who entered demanded news. But Jian, who was sitting next to her, was in a hurry to announce the news. As it turned out, these were the consequences of the first planning meeting with the cold-blooded editor-in-chief. After all, he made everyone nervous. Without hearing the last phrase, and having learned about the new director, she headed towards his office, wondering if he was there or not. Knocking on the door, the lady was in a hurry to see the man about whom she had heard and read so much. And Hyunmin, who was looking through a fashion magazine at that moment, was thinking about how to improve the content and photos. Hearing a knock and allowing himself to enter, he saw a middle-aged woman. The lady, surprised by the man's appearance, looked at him bewitchingly. She noted that he looked like a model. With the words of greeting, she extended her hand. His deputy introduced herself. The woman's name was Seol Mia. Hyunmin Shin was happy to greet her back. She chirped about how honored she was to work with him. After all, the woman hoped that she could learn a lot from him. But the editor-in-chief, showing modesty unusual for a man, replied that he was not yet at the level to learn from him. However, Seol, showering her boss with compliments, said that she would not fall for his tricks. And he responded by saying that the deputy editor was smart enough to understand what he was talking about. Approaching the table, the editor-in-chief again took the magazine in his hands. After spinning it for a couple of minutes and calling it worthless, Hyunmin was already in a hurry to throw it in the trash. And in a private residence, on the top floor of the publishing house, a party was planned in honor of the appointment of the editor-in-chief. Sunbae and Jian, who had arrived a little earlier, looked at the apartment with curiosity. Outside the windows there was a stunning view of the city, but the Sunbae believed that it was not easy to live so high, contemplating the views from the window every day. And the editor, commenting on her remarks with a smile, noted that the delight would disappear over time, and everything would get boring, as is the case everywhere else. Looking at the exquisitely set table, the woman hurried to ask the brown-haired woman a question about how rich the editor-in-chief is. After all, the brunette worked in France for many years. But Jian, who was rushing to the toilet, did not know the answer to her question. And she, in turn, asked the editor not to linger. She needed to write several messages. Deciding to do this immediately, the girl walked quickly, fingering the letters on the keyboard. Suddenly, a child jumped out from around the corner and ran into her. Taking her eyes off the phone, she was already observing a picture in which a nimble boy was lying on his back, and a second later he screamed so much, from pain and fear, that Jian wanted to cover his ears. But without being confused, the girl stretched out her hands towards the baby, apologizing and calming him down. He had no choice but to react to her. Holding the boy close to her, she began to rock him, saying kind words. But having stumbled, she had no choice but to fall. Jian swayed and tried to keep her balance. But invisible hands, firmly grabbing her shoulders, helped her figure out the distribution of the load. Holding the clinging child, she turned around. And what a surprise she was when he looked straight into her eyes, again tenderly and excitingly. Having thanked him, she continued to calm the boy, who was whimpering but no longer screaming. And he, looking carefully at how she did it, was surprised at her natural dexterity, because she did not have children. By offering to hold the baby, he gave the editor the opportunity to catch his breath a little. And Jian, at that moment, asked the brunette how he ended up here. But the editor-in-chief, ignoring her questions, began to entertain the boy. Telling him that he was very handsome, Hyunmin asked his name. Wiping his tears, the kid said that he was Yui. He kindly asked the boy about where it hurt. And the boy not only answered his questions, but also showed him places. The editor, watching him from the side, was amazed at his ability to find a common language with children. She suspected that the man might have children. At that moment, the parents who were already looking for their child, not understanding what was happening, approached the editor-in-chief. Handing over the child, he explained to them that the baby had hit himself, but there appeared to be no injuries. But the parents, knowing their restless boy, thanked the man for calming him down. The brown-haired woman, feeling guilty for the ridiculous story, began to get nervous. But turning around, Henman was already moving along the corridor towards the apartment. John wandered sadly after him without any mood. Not understanding why, but she began to count. Confident that he would turn around and scold her, the girl was not mistaken. Without stopping, he said that he was sad that nothing had changed since the meeting in Paris. She understood what the man was talking about and agreed, continuing to follow him. The brown-haired woman regretted her mistake, but it had already happened, and nothing could be changed. Taking hold of the door handle, Hyunmin noticed that she was obliged to regret. After all, since yesterday the girl has been doing everything to disappoint him. Looking back, he looked at her sadly and noticed that he had asked the brown-haired woman not to make mistakes in his presence. And when he entered the apartment, he quietly hissed that she was walking on slippery ice. The discouraged editor just looked at him guiltily. Sitting down at the table, the editor caught herself thinking that she was not hungry at all. Looking sadly at the plate, she realized that she really was clumsy. Raising the fork to her mouth, it seemed to her that this was a completely different person whom she had met in Paris. But at that moment, the young man sitting next to her, jumping up in his chair, wanted to address the editor-in-chief. What amused him so much, John wondered, looking at her colleague with envy. And he was already asking the question that apparently worried him more than anything else. The guy in the white t-shirt wanted to know if Hyunmin had a girlfriend. The brown-haired woman felt like she was going to fall through the floor. She was even afraid to imagine what reaction the brunette would have. But he, calmly turning his head towards the questioner, asked a question in response. The editor-in-chief did not understand why he had to answer a personal question at a public event. Moreover, he was interested in how it could improve productivity. The young man, realizing that he was embarrassed, hastened to answer that it would not affect. "He's probably not used to this in France," said the blonde in black. "And at such events in Korea, this is a completely common question," the guy added. Henman, looking at them, did not understand why they were so interested in his private life. But apparently, he continued, he will need to adapt to the Korean way of life. Returning to the question, he stated that he does not have a girlfriend. Jian, who was sipping her drink, breathed a sigh of relief at that moment. But accepting the rules of the game, Henman didn't want to stop now. Raising his eyes from the plate of food and turning to the guy, he was ready to ask a counter question. Judging by the expression on his face, he was ready to answer. Hyunmin wanted to know when the guy lost his virginity. Shocked by the girl sitting opposite his, and not noticing the reaction of those sitting next to him, he looked straight at Lee. The reigning silence covered the room. Looking around and pretending that he didn't understand what had happened, he asked what was wrong. After all, he also wanted to know more about his employees. The brown-haired woman began to sweat. Does he really think that asking about having a girlfriend and losing virginity is the same thing? The beauty reasoned. Looking around at her colleagues, she noticed that everyone was pretty red. They clearly did not expect to hear such questions addressed to them. After all, everyone had something to hide. The phone call, persistent and loud, distracting from the event, forced the brown-haired woman to go out into the hall. Moreover, another difficult conversation with an ex-boyfriend was coming up, but she didn't know what to do. Having forgotten to turn off her mobile phone, or at least turn it on silent, she now attracted the attention of others. Carefully turning the phone over, John wanted to at least get rid of the annoying, incessant ringing. Realizing that the person on the other end would not disconnect until he spoke to her, she was nervous. But the brunette's curious gaze already saw how uncomfortable she was. Having asked her if she would like to answer the call, he once again emphasized that he was watching her. But the brown-haired woman answered that they had the wrong number and hurried to quickly distract the boss's attention from herself. But the annoying guy, who was constantly calling, forced the editor to go out into the corridor. Raising her voice, she said that he was completely crazy to distract her from important matters. Realizing that the conversation would be long, well, as always lately, John sat down on the sofa, closing her eyes. He definitely needed to know where she was now. But the girl was not going to report. And Lee Seun-ming, that was the name of her ex-boyfriend, resolutely wanted to take her away from here. She understood that he was drunk. John did not want to continue the conversation. He denied that he was drunk. Moreover, he who cheated on the beautiful brown-haired woman was in pain. And Zhang, once again, repeated to him that everything was over between them. She came to terms with his betrayal, and she was even ready to forgive, as long as he remained in the past. But from the phone, overcoming the distance, came a plea for a meeting. Lee was sure that they had not discussed everything. but the girl said that she was hanging up and asked not to call her again. Adding drama to the situation, the guy shouted into the phone that he missed her so much that he was ready to die. John, who had fallen into hysterics, could not control her emotions, was already shouting insults throughout the entire corridor. But the next moment a strong hand took the phone away from her and silenced her. The girl looked at the phone thief in surprise, and the editor-in-chief, without asking permission, already entered into a conversation with an inadequate man. In a confident tone, the brunette asked to stop bothering the girl. After all, she said that she did not want to hear him, he added, and the brown-haired woman sitting on the sofa, looking at her savior, whispered that these calls irritated her terribly. The guy insisted that the brunette name the place where he was with his beloved girl. But the editor-in-chief came up with a legend on the fly that they were at the Love Motel. Motel of Love. He had never heard of such a thing. He was interested in what they were doing there. What can young people do in such a place? The editor-in-chief calmly answered. The guy on the other side of the phone, speechless, fell silent. And a second later he demanded that the stranger answer who she was in order to sleep with John. Looking carefully at the girl, Henman hurried to say that her fiancé was talking to him. But this word was said in French to annoy the impudent man even more. John, her mouth open in surprise, peered into the brunette's eyes. And he, continuing the conversation, informed Lee that if he decided to call again, it could end badly for him. He still heard insults directed at himself, but the conversation, at least on his part, was over. Lost in thought, the editor-in-chief did not understand how she could talk to such trash. After all, the ex-boyfriend was not worth her lost time, he continued. It seemed as if Jian was absent altogether, and the phone he held out was not intended for her. As he placed the device in her hands, he said that the editor was driving him crazy. But why does it all end with him constantly having to help her out? It's just some kind of karma, the man added. He turned around and left. In the light of the lamps, his perfect figure seemed even more attractive. And Jian, who looked after him in confusion, thought that the man was really right. After all, today he helped her out twice. Sitting down on the olive-green sofa, she looked thoughtfully at the phone, remembering his words about what was driving him crazy. She didn't understand what he meant by this. Frozen, with tears in her eyes, she could not get out of this state. It seemed as if a broken record in the girl's head was pronouncing Henman's words. A wave of memories washed over her. He held out the same thing, but only her wallet and documents, there in Paris, against the backdrop of the Eiffel Tower, where Jian first met him. Leaving the cafe where he paid the bill like a true man, they talked for a long time on the sidewalk. When the guy quietly asked where her hotel was, she did not answer. Her childish naivety disarmed him. The girl didn't understand why he was interested in this, but the man only wanted to take her there. She chuckled, and said that his manners were better than the brown-haired girl thought. He was hooked by her words about this. Henman came closer. His expensive shoes could not compete with her simple brown boots, but still, Jian allowed the thought that he might have bad manners. She apologizes, saying that she might be wrong, but he looks like a city slicker. The girl surprised him more and more and awakened his perception, but she also amused him at the same time. After all, the next minute the editor, asking for a pause to think, said that he was not a bore, like the rich, but also did not look like a gangster. He didn't understand what was in her head, but it was sweet and relaxed. Hyunmin insisted that she say where she was staying. The brown-haired woman, flirting, answered, "What if she doesn't want to confess?" He saw through her, but playing along, he still didn't understand why she resisted. Looking into the man's beautiful eyes, she said that he didn't even say his name. And for some reason, the editor has to tell him where her hotel is in Paris. John believed that the man was behaving quite dishonestly with her, and he assured her that he knew how to leave people speechless. But the editor was in a hurry to offer a deal. His name in exchange for the name of the hotel. But the young man, pretending to be offended, said that he was not so curious. And he turned around and walked away, wanting Jian to enjoy the rest of the trip and having many good memories. Looking after him, she realized that she could not part so easily. After all, the guy was really cool. And he, with his hands in his pockets, disappeared among the people, leaving the curious girl in a thoughtful state. Jian, realizing that she was losing sight of him, shouted in the back that she agreed for the man to escort her. After all, her hotel, called Pullman Paris, was located very close, a 10-minute walk from this place. Of course he came back. The thin, emotional thread already connecting them drew them closer and closer. And if he didn't mind, then they could have a glass, the girl added. Before he could finish saying that this time the drink was really hers, he quickly and closely approached her. Seeing his eyes, the girl realized that she had drowned in them. They are so attractive that they could defeat anyone. Jian thought. Worried, she did not understand his desires, but thought that he did not want to drink. And Hyunmin didn't know how to tell her about them. Carefully examining Jian, the brunette could not understand why she hooked him. Approaching as close as possible, he said that the brown-haired woman had crossed the line. Leaning over, he quietly said that this was making him worry. And Jian understood that it was completely useless to resist his influence. The three of them looked great. But this is not surprising, this was a family. Over morning coffee, men could always discuss current issues. And the paint, which they madly loved, tried to lift their spirits. But that day, the handsome red-haired man, turning to the brunette, said that the neighbors were spreading various rumors about them. Hyunmin, putting down the newspaper, guessed that they were considered a gay couple. He was worried about this attitude towards guys who lived together. Well, why should they automatically be considered gay, he wondered. That's because they had sushi, the brunette answered, looking tenderly at the small red-haired girl with fluffy ponytails on her head. At the mention of her name, she raised her head with interest. And Hyunmin continued that his daughter calls them both dad, which only fuels the rumors. But the situation required changes. The guy, looking sternly at the girl and shaking his index finger, asked to call the brunette uncle. And the little girl, freaking out, tapped his hand hard with her fist. Trying to calm the girl down, the brunette was already stretching out his hands to her, inviting her to sit on his lap. He didn't mind her calling them daddy at all. Gently clinging to the brunette, it was clear that the baby was happy. She liked that she had two dads. Turning to the young man, the brunette asked what he would do. But the guy, putting his hand on the table, did not understand what Hyunmin was asking. Having carefully looked at the interlocutor, the editor-in-chief reminded in a calm tone that he was talking about gossip. Hyunmin just didn't want to adapt to the circumstances. After all this was such trifles, he thought, compared to the sincere love of the baby, who looked at him with adoration. Let them think what they want. Ending the meaningless conversation, the man said. Now he just wanted to enjoy her company. Holding the notebook in front of her, Jian was clearly worried. Looking thoughtfully at the table, she understood that the meeting on the November issue would not be easy. After all, it will be headed by a new editor-in-chief. And the brunette, looking around the team, hurried to start it, realizing that everyone was assembled. The editor-in-chief was excited, but tried to hide his emotions. He stood up, leaning his hands on the table. His whole appearance indicated that the man wanted to have a productive meeting. Proposing to go in order, he suggested starting with the deputy editor-in-chief. A striking woman in a terracotta blouse, without looking at Hyunmin, recommended including the leopard print trend in the number. But the boss already wanted to hear the next speaker. The short-haired, brown-haired man spoke thoughtfully about what he would think about fur. But this idea, like the leopard print proposal, quickly lost relevance. And Lee, cheerful and creative as always, suggested including something summary so that readers wouldn't get bored in November. He believed that it was necessary to invite the famous actress. After all, she can pose for a magazine somewhere in Southeast Asia. At that moment, Hyunmin looked at him with a disappointed look. Since the options were rather dubious, and there was little time left, the brunette began to complain that his head was about to explode. Closing his eyes and thanking the guy for making him laugh, he suggested moving on. And next was Jian. She understood that previous ideas were failures. Worried that her proposal would not be accepted, she still wanted to try to present it. Smiling, she quietly began by saying that soon it would be Firefighters' Day. So why don't they invite real hero firefighters to tell readers about their efforts? The girl said. She offered to arrange a photo shoot. Create a design in the form of a fire in the background, the editor continued, and firefighters in the foreground. At the same time, their faces will be tired, and their poses will be like when putting out a fire, she added. Finishing, she said that they would be able to show the readership how hard the work of these people is. They will also be able to draw attention to fires and methods of extinguishing them, the brown-haired woman concluded. Waiting for the reaction of her colleagues, she counted on support, but the silence that hung did not bode well. Everyone sat, deep in thought. Clutching the notebook to her chest, the brown-haired woman felt herself sweating as she reported. Now she understood that she was doomed, and she should not have suggested such nonsense. But the editor-in-chief's verdict was as follows. Everyone was free except Miss Yu. Not understanding what was happening, the deputy editor-in-chief hurried with the question. After all, she also wanted to continue participating in the meeting. And the boss, irritably, said that all ideas, except for Jian's proposals, were complete garbage. Therefore, everyone can pick up their piles of garbage and move away. Glaring at his subordinates, the editor-in-chief hastened to add that everyone should revise their proposals before they go home. Holding the folders in their hands, the staff were shocked. After all, this could take a huge amount of time. Exhausted and upset, they did not understand how to behave. The subordinates, clearly not accustomed to such treatment, said goodbye. And Henman, left alone with John, was thinking about how to implement the girl's proposal. But realizing that she was sitting quite far from him, he asked her to come to him. But she didn't move. Her doubts about her abilities made him smile. And the girl, realizing that at any moment she could fall under the hot hand, was cautious. But Henming, looking warmly at Jian, asked him to come closer. He didn't want it to seem from the outside that he was going to eat her. The brunette asked her to just come up and not ask meaningless questions. Rising from his chair, he noticed her beautiful dress, tightly fitting her ideal figure. And the brown-haired woman's slender legs were beyond praise. On the way to him, apparently worried, she tripped. The tight dress began to crackle treacherously. But he, in his own way reassuring her, said that Miss Yu should not be embarrassed because they saw each other naked. This remark was outrageous. Angry, John tried to find words, but instead only blushed. And he simply admired her. Like 3 months ago in Paris, when, expecting nothing from a chance meeting, he received pleasure. And events took him to where they were approaching the hotel where John was staying. Entering the huge, bright room, the man looked around, and the hospitable girl said that he would like it here. John asked the guy to make him feel at home. Then the brown-haired woman, saying that she would like to take a shower, was already heading to the bathroom. He was clearly nervous and tense. His reaction to this event was strange to say the least. All the brunette could say at that moment was why she would do this. Trying to calm the young man down, which looked extremely funny, John cheerfully said that it was not what he thought. She was just sweating and wanted to freshen up. Walking deeper into the room, he did not stop thinking about her words. Most likely the man was afraid of something. Sitting on the sofa with a can of drink, Hyunmin closed his eyes. He hoped that her procedures would not take much time and that she would soon join him. Leaving him alone with his thoughts, the girl had no idea that a plan was brewing in his head. While drinking the drink, the man thought that John, charming him, was trying to draw him into his game. And the brown-haired woman, entering the shower room, was shocked by his reaction, but understanding how to behave further. It seemed to her that she had gone far. But the brunette was beautiful, and she could not deny herself such medicine. Leaning over the sink, the brown-haired woman asked herself questions. John couldn't understand how she invited a stranger she'd only known for a couple of hours into her room. Looking at herself in the mirror, she asked why she did it. After all, this was the act of a crazy person, the girl stated. The lonely moon, a witness to reckless actions, curiously looked out the window in which the girl doubted her decision. And the guy, worried, was already drinking the 3rd can of low-alcohol drink without even noticing how it happened. Returning to him, the brown-haired woman did not understand how to gently hint to him that she wanted more, and not having come up with anything better, she offered to go to the shower, if of course he wanted. But the brunette, leaning on the back of the sofa, pretended that he did not understand why he had to do this, and the beauty, without being taken aback, said that when he gets home it might be difficult to take a bath. Besides, he has to work tomorrow, the girl concluded. No matter how strange it looked, Henman got up from the sofa and went to the bathroom. And the satisfied brown-haired woman, smiling, added that he would feel more fresh. Standing in the middle of the room, John understood that having chosen the right arguments, she was confidently moving towards her goal. Coming out of the shower, the man with a towel on his shoulders sat down opposite her. It was as if he was looking for the right words, but could not find them. And the beautiful woman, looking at the shy man, again offered to drink. She so wanted to share her pain with him, and alcohol was a great helper for this. Telling her story of love and betrayal, she could not hold back her tears. After all, the brown-haired woman loved her ex-boyfriend for the last 5 years of her life. And even now, when she thinks about him, her heart breaks. But when he cheated on her, the unfortunate girl, having bought a tour, flew to Paris trying to calm down. That's how she ended up here. She still couldn't believe that she was the only one who was full of love for her ex-boyfriend. But now she felt better, because the girl was able to tell about her pain to 2 interlocutors, a stranger and a moon peeping through the window. Hyunmin searched for the right words to calm her down. He understood that what had happened was terrible, and the brown-haired girl will definitely meet mutual love. But suddenly, in a fit of emotion, she moved closer to him. Carefully examining his face, she noted that he had alluring eyes, and he, batting his eyelashes, did not understand her interest. Reaching out her hand and gently touching his cheek, she felt the brunette shudder. He held his breath, but did not remove his hand. Henman looked at her in surprise, not hiding his confusion. But then, sighing quietly, he closed his eyes and, covered in sweat, said that the girl was drunk, and she indignantly reminded him to call her by name, to which the brunette, quickly reacting, already agreed and said that Jianyu was drunk. Sitting on the bed, the editor was surprised that she had been doing and saying all sorts of things that were out of character for her since the moment they met. Her touch did not reduce the tension between them, but only added intrigue. At that moment, Jian felt comfortable with him, and therefore, no longer hiding her emotions, the beautiful brown-haired woman wanted him, and now she was talking about it. Henman knew it was time to answer something that will reveal his desires. But embarrassment still held him back, and without coming up with anything better, the man said that everyone has their disappointments. But Jian, who took the initiative into her own hands, already offered to kiss. She blushed, but was clearly bolder than the man. His eyes looked at her in surprise, and he did not immediately believe his ears. He looked at the girl. He expected her to change her mind or laugh. The girl's confidence made Hyunmin's heart beat faster. He was ready to do it if she insisted. But the expression on the brown-haired woman's face was calm and confident. She waited for action on his part, and he had already hugged her with strong arms and pressed her tightly to himself. He felt the warmth and breath of the girl. His indecision began to recede. And Jian, feeling the guy's touch and trying to calm the butterflies in her stomach, looked intently into his eyes. Her gaze was full of trust and desire. This surprised him. But Hyunmin felt that he should stop, not quite understanding her verbal signs. Outwardly it looked strange. After all, a man with his strength and attractiveness should have been more confident in his actions. But for some reason, instead of kissing him, he decided to find out whether she had a boyfriend now or not. After all, not all guys are like the girl's ex. That's all he had time to add when her lips touched his. She was tired of waiting, talking and wasting such wonderful moments. Yielding to the impulse, the young people froze in a sweet kiss. But a few seconds later, when their eyes met, she waited for his reaction, worried that she had done something wrong. And the man, awakening his feelings, was already in a hurry to respond to her hot kiss. Jian understood that a start had been made, but the girl did not expect what happened next. He didn't want to stop anymore, stroking her arms and asking her to lie down. Trying not to scare away the magic of the moment, he was ready to continue the foreplay, and she, realizing that the initiative had passed into his hands, closely watched the man. Lips and hands intertwined in an impulse, fueled the feelings. He whispered to her that she wanted to relax, and Hyunmin could help her do it. Leaning over her, the man with confident movements helped her take a comfortable position. Her body, relaxing under his touch, became aroused. Their lips met again and never parted. Pulling back a little, the man warned her that if he started, there would be no turning back. Therefore, he asked her to think before she plunged into the abyss of passion. He was ready to retreat, but now, not later. Hugging him, the girl looked intently into his eyes. The beauty thought that there was so much tenderness and care in him that Jian wanted to experience everything. She asked not to stop. It would even offend her. Now she didn't care what would happen next because they wouldn't see each other again, the girl thought. Smiling back, he knew that the last thing he wanted was for Jung to refuse him now. Her scent and body captivated him. All doubts and anxieties dissipated, giving way to desire and feelings. But now, a handsome red-haired guy coming out of the parking lot was calling Hyunmin. He informed him that Miss Lee was complaining that she had not seen her son for several weeks. The guy also reminded the brunette to pick up Suli on his way home from work. But when he reminded him about his mother again, the editor-in-chief became angry in response and asked not to remind him about this for the 5th time. And the guy indignantly told Hyunmin, who was driving at that moment, that he still wasn't listening to him. But the brunette was in no mood, and therefore did not want to continue the conversation. At the same time, the young man asked to buy milk and donuts. The editor-in-chief reluctantly agreed. But the next moment, he was already shouting into the phone that he was not an errand boy, to which Suli's dad calmly replied that he would still go to the store for milk. The brown-haired woman, waiting for the elevator to arrive, only heard the remnants of the conversation out of the corner of her ear. After all, she was completely absorbed in the memories of the past meeting. The red-haired handsome man approached the girl exactly at the moment when the elevator announced its arrival. Noticing her lost appearance, the handsome man was interested in whether she was entering the cabin or not. Startled by his words, and looking up from the wall of the entrance, she looked at the guy. After greeting the young man, she noticed that she almost fell asleep. And the guy, politely letting her go ahead, said that she needed to sleep at home. While talking in the elevator, the brown-haired woman noticed that they were finishing work at the same time. And the guy, scratching the back of his head, confirmed her assumptions. The question that came into her head, which she could not even clearly formulate, was rushing out. The brown-haired girl wanted to know the name of the red-haired guy's partner, and he pretended that he didn't understand what she was asking. But the curious Jian did not calm down. She hurried to clarify what Suli's dad meant. Raising her hand to her lips and continuing the interrogation, she still wanted to understand who this man was for the guy. But the red-haired handsome man clearly did not want to talk about it. She noticed that he was nervous, but her tactlessness continued to pave the way to the truth, breaking all boundaries, and he, having let go of the situation, allowed her to think about them as she wanted. Discussing this topic at dinner the day before, the young man, resting his head on his hand, told Henman that he really didn't care what his neighbors thought about them, to which the editor-in-chief recommended that he simply not deny this fact, so that curious people would stop asking once they were convinced that they were right. He didn't understand why he had to do this, and the brunette saw no other way out, because explaining to everyone that they were not gay was stupid. But the red-haired guy said thoughtfully that it would look strange. Yes, this is logical, Henman picked up, but you can't shut everyone's mouth. And the persistent girl in the elevator continued to fantasize about the status of the man with whom the red-haired handsome man lives. If it was not difficult for her, then the guy asked to call him a friend. Having received an intelligible answer, the girl accepted this version. But now she was wondering why she had never seen his friend. Apparently he was a very busy man. The guy confirming her version. He also talked about being a doctor. Looking at the young man with wide-open eyes, she asked him about his profession, and he didn't understand what surprised her so much. But the editor was already in a hurry to say that the man in front of her seemed quite intelligent, and he just smiled in response. Coming out of the elevator, the young people said goodbye. Jian wished the doctor well, and he, holding out a business card, introduced himself. He wanted the girl to remember that his name is Shin Hae-jun, and not Mr. 1003, he said, smiling. Looking at the clinic's business card, Jian was really convinced that he was a doctor, but the specialist did not yet know in what area. And Shin openly said that Blade specializes in liposuction. Looking mysteriously at the girl, he didn't understand whether she knew about this type of medicine or not. And also, the red-haired handsome man continued, he performs plastic surgery and fat transplantation. But the girl, having lost interest in the conversation, only quietly assented to him, when suddenly her eyes widened. It seemed to her that the doctor was trying to lure her into his clinic. Realizing that this was unnecessary, the young man, scratching the back of his head, apologized. Jian giggled. It was a professional habit to advertise your clinic. But the brown-haired woman was in a hurry to reassure him, because she also worked for hire, so she understood what he was talking about. Apologizing, the guy regretted that he completely chatted the girl. Wanting her to rest, the doctor noticed that he lifted Jian's spirits. In return, she reciprocated. Opening the door to the apartment, she suddenly heard Shin call her, but not by name, but as the girl called him earlier. Miss 1004 turned around and looked at her neighbor, and he in turn hurried to tell Jian that she forgot to say something in response to him, because all well-mannered people act this way. Quickly replaying the conversation in her head, Jian did not understand what was being said, but the guy talked about her name, which he never heard from her. His eyes looked piercingly at his interlocutor. Looking at him carefully, she suddenly remembered about one celebrity who came out as gay, but she thought he did not look at women with such a look. Pretending that she missed his remark, the brown-haired woman looked at the smiling Shin. Now he seemed strange to her, at least not at all the way she saw him for the first time. His gaze was suspicious, the girl recalled, hastening to slam the door to the apartment behind her. Skyscrapers filled with people returning from work illuminated the space. The young moon, against the backdrop of the starry bodies, seemed so distant and lonely. And Hyunmin, dressed in a black coat, standing at the door of 705, held in his hands a charming bouquet of beautiful ultra-blue flowers. As he was about to press the bell button, he was preparing to make excuses, well, as always lately. After all, I haven't visited my mother for a long time. Memories came flooding back. The last time she noticed that her son apparently liked to hold on to past feelings. Taking a step away from the door, he felt that he needed to calm down. Sighing heavily, the brunette unbuttoned his coat. Leaning on the wall, he recalled that his mother noticed how her son was hurting himself more. Realizing that she would raise this issue again, the brunette prepared himself mentally. But he had to go, and when he rang the doorbell, he put on a grimace of good humor. After all, I was ready to see not only my mother, but also my beloved daughter. The woman, loudly and emotionally greeting the brunette, was glad of his arrival, and the beautiful girl, in a peach dress being next to her grandmother, could not hold back her emotions. A little late he asked for forgiveness, but the woman was not offended, knowing that her son was very busy. Handing out a beautiful bouquet, Henman hoped for mercy.